Now, well into August, the competition is heating up at Seahawks training camp, especially in the offensive line of the football. Rob Rang and I are going to be diving into takeaways from day 10 of Seahawks training camp here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you're in Rob's neck of the woods down in Tacoma, Washington, or listening in Cleveland, Ohio, in Browns country. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks back in action, 10th training camp practice. It goes fast once you start the NFL season. The Seahawks into week 3 of training camp. We'll have all the key takeaways, including a certain number 7 being back under center and looking fully healthy, and much more. Plus, Mike Jerrell joining us for our latest one-on-one from Seahawks training camp, brought to you courtesy of FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. After a day off on Sunday, Seattle returned to the practice field at the VMAC for another padded practice, their 10th training camp practice. And Rob, as some people like to say now, we are no longer giving out scholarships. Players are not on scholarship. Now it is everybody is battling for starting jobs, roster spots. We are in the nitty-gritty of training camp, and in particular on offense, really starting to see a couple of competitions now that have gone beyond intriguing to truly being must-see TV, and it really centered around today's practice, in particular the third down back running back job, which now, based on what Mike Macdonald said, sounds like it is very much up for grabs between Kenny McIntosh and George Holani, who, what a day the undrafted rookie from Boise State had today at the VMAC.
Well, and that's a great way to kind of start things off, Corbin, with the way that you describe it, because, you know, it was an off day on Sunday. Saturday, of course, was the scrimmage, or at least that's the way that the Seahawks have described it in the past. So the Seahawks scouts and coaches had a day on Sunday to kind of review tape. The Seahawks players had a day to, kind of just get their bearings back again, and then yet go full bore into what is essentially becoming now a game day, or a game week, with the Chargers game of this upcoming Saturday. And so this is a massive opportunity for players to really kind of seize attention. And for George Holani to have the performance that it sounds like that he had, undrafted free agent out of Boise State. We've talked about him a lot. Kenny McIntosh, the running back that was selected in the 7th round a year ago out of Georgia, but missed the entire season. We've been talking about this all off season, Corbin. This is one of the matchups that we were really fascinated by. And for Jelani to have just a bowl over type of performance, at least from Nehemiah Pritchett, the rookie, the Auburn rookie corner's perspective, I think that is something that is definitely going to capture the attention of the Seahawks, again, their coaches and the scouts. But let's not get too far into the competition here, and just kind of ignore the fact that, as you alluded to, number 7, Geno Smith, was back onto the field again for the Seahawks. That's the big news of the day right now. But again, I'm very excited to hear your perspective on what you saw at the running back battle as well.
Yeah, we'll talk quarterbacks as we get deeper into the show, because certainly fans got to see why they should be breathing a sigh of relief that Geno Smith is back out there, and we'll detail that. But I'm glad you mentioned bowling over and Nehemiah Pritchett, because, listen, in today's style training camp where it's thud normally, and you're not tackling guys to the ground, and you're not necessarily, the running backs are not, I don't know if they're not supposed to, but they're not supposed to be dishing out the punishment necessarily from the standpoint where they're running over people. George Holani said, I'm going to disregard that rule, because what he did to Nehemiah Pritchett was cruel an unusual punishment. Just absolutely demolished him, bowled over him. They might still be scooping Nehemiah Pritchett off the VMAC grass. I mean, he bowled over him. Ken Walker III on the sideline was sprinting out to the field to George Holani, who I think got stopped at the 3-yard line, ran out there to greet him and celebrate. Teammates were going nuts. Reporters were going nuts. I mean, that was the kind of fireworks you don't normally see in an NFL training camp. And oh, by the way, a couple plays later, he powered his way to the end zone. And I think he put somebody else on their backside. George Holani was bringing an energy to Seattle's practice and a physicality to the practice that it's clearly evident. Mike Macdonald, he has not been very welcome to praising players. He's been very cautious about that in the early stages of training camp. And for him to not only talk about the energy that he's bringing daily, but when he was asked about how Kenny McIntosh is doing, to immediately say, well, Kenny's getting pushed right now. Like, George Holani's right there with him. Word for word, that's what Mike Macdonald said. He is not sugarcoating words. He's coming out and he is testing Kenny McIntosh right now because that's what's happening on the field. George Holani is in the rearview mirror, and objects are much closer than they appear. In this case, it is coming for you. So Kenny McIntosh, he got the reps of the first team in their 2-minute drill. But I'll tell you what, if George Holani keeps doing what he did today, and by all accounts, I was not at the scrimmage on Saturday, but all the reporters I was talking to said Holani looked really good on Saturday. If he keeps stacking days like this, the Seahawks may have a very tough decision on their hands with that third down running back role. And the guy that you and I thought maybe had the best chance to be the undrafted rookie to make this team, George Holani is the one that is really shining right now.
Yeah, I mean, it may make it that's not even that difficult of a decision at this point because we just have continued to not see much flash out of Kenny McIntosh. And if Holani is showing that, anybody who watched his tape at Boise State knew that he was a talent. He just had some durability issues. So it's very exciting news to hear that George Holani is just acquitting himself as well as he is to the Seahawks offense. I think it's also important that we take a step back and look along the offensive line. And that is another positional group that really does have some fierce competition starting, especially at the center and right guard position. Ola Oluwatimi and Nick Harris have basically been alternating with the one, so that has been a fascinating kind of development, similar to what you said here. And I think it's interesting that Mike Macdonald was willing to just name drop George Holani as a follow-up to a question about Kenny McIntosh. Similar kind of thing, and he just kind of offered up. I mean, the observers who were there at camp know that Nick Harris has been getting some run here, but for him to just mention that the center position is something that he wants to see, basically somebody kind of, take another step forward. And there's been some talk about even the free agent from Miami, Connor Williams. So that's a fascinating one. And then of course the right guard position, the Anthony Bradford, it continues to run with the ones, but the rookie Christian Haynes, of course, is awful exciting prospect as well. It does sound like now I'm spacing on his name, but the right guard who has switched over to right tackle, and
McClendon Curtis.
Thank you, sir. That McClendon Curtis is kind of solidifying his role on this squad as that guy who can play both right guard and right tackle. With Abraham Lucas continuing to be out, he is remaining at the right tackle position. Again, that's McClendon Curtis. So again, center and right guard to me are the positions up front along the offensive line, as well as running back, that I think are really the positional balance on the offensive side of the ball, Corbin, that we got to be paying a great deal of attention to.
The right guard position, it actually doesn't feel like there's much of a competition going on right now because Anthony Bradford's been getting all the ones. Christian Haynes hasn't even gotten a chance to do that. But center, the dynamic continues to change there because I thought a week ago that Oluwatimi kind of had that job on lockdown. And now here we are, Nick Harris, not only is he getting reps, it seems like he's getting more reps with the first team offense. But really the real thing that's fascinating, you mentioned Connor Williams. His own agent came out today on a podcast and said that he's in negotiations with the Seahawks and he expects that he's going to have a new contract in 48 to 72 hours. Now, there's other teams in the mix. He visited the Ravens today. But the fact that the Seahawks continue to be in on Connor Williams that tells you they're not happy with what they're just seeing right now from the competition, because Connor Williams is going to start for you at center if you sign him. That is no longer a competition. If he's fully healthy, which his agent Drew Rosenhaus said he could play right now, he will be ready for week 1. If he's healthy, that is your starting center. It's not Olu Oluwatimi. It's not Nick Harris. There's not a competition anymore. It's Connor Williams. And so that really adds a wrinkle there where it almost looks like Mike Macdonald and the rest of the organization are saying, this is open, but if we can get this guy, it's no longer open. That is our starting center. And so that is now the storyline to watch with the Seahawks for the rest of this week. And we'll see what ends up happening, where Connor Williams signs. But if he comes to Seattle, that is your starting center. That competition closes up. And then maybe that third down running back role is the most intriguing competition that is left. Maybe Christian Haynes gets back into that first team mix with the right guard spot. But at this point, nothing suggests that he's going to be battling for that job right now. So running back, center, we'll see what happens there. But competition is definitely heating up on the offensive side of the football for the Seahawks. When we come back, as Rob already mentioned, Geno Smith was back on the practice field today for the Seahawks. How did he look? We're going to be diving into that. Sam Howell's day, some really fun problems that are developing on the defensive side of the football, and of course the bluntness of the man that is Mike Macdonald. We will get to that coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Locked On Seahawks is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you'd do if you had an extra hour in your day? For me, I wish I had a bit more time to paint horror movie models like Critters and Gremlins. I'm a nerd like that. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you could do more of it. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try today. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined on today's show by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategy so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Seahawks with their 10th training camp practice concluding today at the VMAC. As we just mentioned, the competition is really heating up on the offensive side of the football in particular. But the other big storyline coming out of today's practice was just simply having Geno Smith back under center for the Seahawks. And listen, Sam Howell may have a future as a starting quarterback again in the NFL. It may very well be in Seattle, but so far that has not been the look that we have gotten from Sam Howell on the practice field to this point. He has been very inconsistent. That continued into Saturday's mock scrimmage where his accuracy continued to be erratic. The same could be said for today's practice. So getting Geno Smith back out there, the really good news, Rob, he was moving around well. He took off and ran a couple of times, did not show any residual effects from this knee hip injury that he missed 4 practices with. I think they just made sure he was 100% healthy. They didn't bring him back too quickly. He was moving up the pocket well. There was a play he climbed to the pocket when Rayshon Jenkins was coming on a blitz. Charles Cross washed him downfield. Smith stepped up to buy himself time, hits Jackson Smith and Jigba on a deep crosser that ends up going for 40-plus yards, and that led to a Ken Walker, the third rushing touchdown, the longest touchdown drive of the day for any of the offensive groups. Geno had a few throws that he ended up missing on, but generally picked right up where he left off before this injury, was playing with great command, with great poise, great accuracy. So anybody that was wondering what things are going to look like, Geno Smith very much looked like his usual self which is great news, especially when you consider that Sam Howell just has not been able to up the consistency card so far as the backup quarterback for the Seahawks.
Yeah, he not only has struggled to kind of seize control of the opportunity that was afforded to him. It sounds like PJ Walker is actually making a push with Sam Howell as well. And so that's going to be a fascinating positional battle, I think, that we need to be keeping an eye on. But as you said, Corbin, I mean, a huge sigh of relief from anybody that was at the Virginia Mason Athletic Center just to see Geno Smith back there on the field. And I love the fact that you mentioned that the Geno Smith showed his willingness to step up into the pocket, to do a couple of scrambles, as if to kind of prove to himself and to prove to all the onlookers, Seahawks scouts, coaches, and the fans there, that he is feeling good. And so that, of course, is very encouraging news as well. I had to kind of jump back for a second, just that Connor Williams situation. I think that is fascinating. The fact that Oluwatimi is a player that I do believe, like Sam Howell, can be a starter in the NFL. But is it a starter for a playoff, a Super Bowl caliber winning club? That, to me, is the question. And so that's when you look at Connor Williams, 6'5", 300 pounds, runs like an offensive tackle. You just knowing how much the Seahawks are very likely to be using a bunch of zone concepts. They're going to ask their center as well as their guards to be able to move and adjust on the fly. I really do think that Connor Williams would be a huge addition to the Seahawks if he were available to them at a price point that they found palatable. So that, to me, is something that absolutely bears watching here as well. But again, the big story of the day is the fact that Geno Smith is back on the football field, and it sounds like he is slinging those arrows Michael Penix style in Ryan Grubb's offense yet again.
Yeah, he was thrown with great velocity, tight spirals. He looked like Geno Smith. And so any fans that were having reservations, like, is this something that could linger and maybe he's not able to be fully healthy? I don't think you have anything to worry about. When he was able to tuck and run and get 8 yards in a scramble today, that should have been very assuring for fans. And I think the Seahawks just were being cautious on that front. And maybe they wanted a couple more days to see, hey, can Sam Howell take this opportunity with a first-team offense and run with it? And as you mentioned, he did not. Now, on the defensive side of the football, we were just talking competitions and offense. On defense, it's crazy that I'm saying this, but we've talked Artie Burns a lot up to this point. Artie Burns, to me, is a lock to make this football team now. He just continues to get the job done. But Mike Macdonald has the best of problems right now in that cornerback group, in the sense that we saw what he did in Baltimore last year, Rob. He liked to mix in different corners. They played 4 or 5 guys at the cornerback positions, depending on personnel groupings, opponent. The Seahawks are going to provide him an opportunity to be able to do that, especially with Devin Witherspoon, because now you can play him inside and you can put Trey Brown at left cornerback. Trey Brown had another really good day, a couple pass breakups, one of them against DK Metcalf. Looks really good, has looked good all of camp. You can play him on that outside boundary position when Devin Witherspoon's in the slot. If Witherspoon slides out to the boundary and you still want to play nickel, Artie Burns had what would have been a sack. He had a pass deflection on a blitz today, so he was wreaking havoc as a blitzer, had another pass breakup. He's been getting his hands on the ball every single practice, at least once or twice. He looks so comfortable playing that nickel role, which he had never played before last year. And he just looks like he's really figuring things out. So they can mix and match their position groupings based on what they're doing with Devin Witherspoon, and they can move a bunch of different pieces, and they can do a lot of fun things. So, again, this is a really good problem to have if you're Mike Macdonald because, well, I can play nickel with Trey Brown out there, but I also really like playing it with Artie Burns in that slot position. And both of these guys continue to make big plays and turn in outstanding efforts in training camp. It feels like they're both obviously on the roster now, but Mike Macdonald and his staff have to figure out how much do we want to deploy both these players in the confines of their scheme.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I just think that Artie Burns, you mentioned the fact that it wasn't until this past season that he started getting his opportunities at the nickel or slot position. But Artie Burns had been a quality special teamer in the past. And again, his size, his experience on the outside, I think has always made him kind of a guy that's on the bubble. So that's very encouraging that he is playing so well inside. I think it's a critical position for the Seahawks to have quality depth option behind behind Devin Witherspoon. Look, Witherspoon is a superstar. We can all see that. We saw great evidence of that in just his rookie season. It just looks like he is just getting better, but still, he's 180 pounds, and the Seahawks have got to be smart about how they use this player. If they're going to be sending him on blitzes, then sometimes he's going to get home. Sometimes he's going to face a fullback head on, and those are going to be collisions that can lead to injury problems. So you can't just have another body at the nickel slot position as they back up behind Witherspoon. He's got to be somebody with a similar type of an aggressive mentality, experience, and ball hawking skills. And so far, that player has been Artie Burns. So look, I'm very interested in DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchett. We talked about in the opening of the show that Nehemiah Pritchett had a struggle a little bit, at least in run support today. Again, at that nickel cornerback spot, that is even more important that you have the physicality. So again, Artie Burns, I think, is, as you said, he may be making himself a lock for this roster.
You know what's really surprised me about him, Rob, because you just mentioned you need to have somebody that has a similar mindset in terms of aggressiveness and some of the same skills. Like, you don't have another Devin Witherspoon on your roster, sure, but Artie Burns really times his blitzes well, and he's aggressive, and he takes good paths to the quarterback, and he plays with more physicality than I expected. So he has really checked off those boxes. And I think the thing that nobody was considering here is his change of direction skills were really good coming out of Miami. And he was a first-round pick, but he never had to use those playing inside. That is really, his skill set caters well to it. So, yeah, he's not Devin Witherspoon, but in terms of how you can deploy him, there's a lot of similar things that you can do. So he's really opened eyes. Mike Macdonald seems like he's really high on him, and he likes experienced guys like that. So Burns and Brown, I mean, Trey Brown is going to be on this roster, but now that Mike Jackson's been banged up and he's missed 4 straight practices, Trey Brown has really taken hold of that second outside corner spot if Witherspoon's playing inside. And the Seahawks can do all kinds of different stuff with these different players, and that provides you a ton of flexibility on the defensive side of the football. When we come back, we are going to shift to our training camp one-on-one series. Mike Jerrell, one of the few Division II players that got drafted this past season, 6th-round pick for the Seahawks. I had a chance to catch up with him at the VMAC, and maybe some personal stories in there, as well as a former adversary playing at Pike High School in Indianapolis. We'll have that interview coming up next year on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode of Locked On Seahawks is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. The sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 win or lose. Is LeBron James going to score 20-plus points in the U.S. men's basketball team's next game? Does Byron Murphy II jump up to the top odds to win Defensive Rookie of the Year? Will we see a 200-meter dash in the women's race in the Olympics with an even tighter finish than the men's race? What are you waiting for? All of this can be bet on right now on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So go to FanDuel.com and add a big win to your summer bucket list today. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. There may not have been a more intriguing pick for the Seahawks this past draft in terms of players who were unknowns that had a ton of potential than Mike Jerrell, their 6th-round pick out of Findlay University, a Division II school in Ohio. Played 6 years for the Oilers. When he went there, he was a 250-pound offensive lineman / tight end. By the time he left, a 310-pound All-American, a 2-time All-American selection, got invited to the Hula Bowl, put on a show at Ohio State's Pro Day. He is a 98th percentile athlete for the tackle position. There's very few guys at his size that can move the way he does on the offensive line. And so far, it's been pretty impressive, Rob. early on in training camp. We haven't gotten to see a ton of team reps. The Seahawks are kind of weaning him into that, but he has looked darn good in one-on-ones, and that continued today with 2 really impressive reps against undrafted rookie Nelson Caesar, who, by the way, had 2 sacks that would have been sacks in the scrimmage period today, working against Stone Forsythe. So that is a big win for Mike Jerrell as he gets his feet underneath him and tries to make a run for a roster spot here in Seattle.
Yeah, a massive win for Mike Jerrell. And as you mentioned, the Hula Bowl, that's where I really kind of, he caught my attention. You travel around to these different All-Star games, the Senior Bowl, and we've been so fortunate to have executive Jim Nagy on with us multiple times, the East-West Shrine Bowl. But the Hula Bowl is one that has always kind of been an avenue where you could find some late round or undrafted free agents that have carved out extensive careers in the NFL. One of the more underrated stops. And the fact that Mike Jerrell was able to impress there, and as you said, the Ohio State program, he going up against elite talent, and that still stood out there. So very encouraging development from the Seahawks in training camp. We knew that Jerrell was an athlete, but to actually be able to match the physicality of proven NFL caliber players, huge news for Mike Jerrell, and I think it's going to be a fascinating interview. I can't wait.
It was really fun at the early stage of the training camp because former guest of the show and Finlay coach Corey Allen, he was in attendance for a couple of Seattle's practices early in training camp to watch his former player and see how he stacked up with the Seahawks. I had a chance to chat with Jerrell about what it was like to have Corey Allen not coaching him and be in the stands and much more in a one-on-one interview at the VMAC. Take a listen.
This is interesting. Your coach was out here for a couple days, and we've kind of struck up a little bit of a friendship. So what was it like getting to have a couple training camp practices with Coach Allen being on the sidelines? And any advice that he gave you when you guys went out for dinner?
It was a little bit weird because it's like the first time in like 6 years that he hasn't been my coach. Like I've always had him either in game or on the sideline. He's been my coach for the majority of my playing career at this point. It was kind of weird having him be a spectator instead of being the one coaching me. But he didn't really give me any any tips of like technique wise. He let my coaches coach me. Whatever they teaching me. Listen to what they're saying. Like just gave me more so of encouragement. Let me know that like I belong here and that you can do it. Pretty much installing confidence in me.
Yeah, he told me that he was hoping that the conversation was going to lead into some really productive first couple of days in pads. So how'd you feel out there getting your first opportunity to really smack people?
I felt good. I felt really excited. It was fun to, just get out there and pads. We've been in jerseys and t-shirts for the longest, and now we actually get to put hands on somebody. Felt good. I'm looking forward more to better days. Continue to get better, continue to work on technique and improving my technique, and just, keep working to earn a position on the team.
Now that you've had a few months under your belt here to kind of get your feet wet and get used to the NFL experience, what was the biggest eye-opener for you coming from Division II to coming up to the NFL and playing with NFL players?
I would say just like coming from D2, coming to NFL, just obviously the level of talent. Like you're going up against a guy every time somebody comes out, it's another guy that's just as good as him, or if not better than him, coming in. Like getting used to that. Like D2, you'll go against a guy, he gets tired, and his backup comes in. His backup's nowhere near as good as he is, but here the backups are good, and like you gotta be on your toes every play, and like just and it moves fast. I say it moves fast. Like not like the players obviously are faster, but like players' decision making is so much more faster. Like they have athleticism on top of quick thinking, so when they see you do something, they know immediately what to do, and like getting used to that, it's been a challenge.
How much have you had to focus with that, with guys like Geno Smith and Boy Mop on the other side that are looking at every last detail with the way that you handle your pass sets? Is that something that you've really had to button down early because of the fact that those guys come down? Oh, his right foot's turned a certain way.
I learned that. I learned that in OTAs. Like I'm like, okay, like you can't turn your shoulders even an inch. They already know. Oh, let's take the inside, or you short on a set. Okay, let me beat you on the edge. It's like you got to make sure you're on point every single play, and like you're paying attention to your technique and making sure you're getting off the ball, because that first step is the most important step. And if you struggle with that, then everything else is, sets up for disaster. And so I focus on that a lot during my break in OTAs, just getting out on my first step, staying square, making sure my hands are in the right place. I'm still working on hands, still working on technique, trying to do different sets and stuff to make it a challenge on them, so they can't get too comfortable with what I'm doing, and they can game plan me a little easier in practice.
You've got a really interesting connection coming into the NFL. The fact that you played next to George Fant's cousin.
Yeah.
How has that connection helped you in this process? He had an interesting path to the NFL too. I mean, he didn't play any tackle at Western Kentucky, and he comes into the NFL, and now he's getting close to 10 years in the league. Mm-hmm. What has it been like being able to work with him in the offseason and having that built-in connection already through your former teammate?
It felt like having like another brother. Like Joseph, obviously his cousin, Joseph Carter, he's obviously like my brother in Findlay. And then coming here, it was like having another brother, like a big brother. Him and George and my brother are actually like the same age, and George actually has the same birthday as my mom. So it was kind of crazy. I'm like, dang, you the same age as my brother. You had the same birthday. I'm like, dang, it's like my brother, like. But it's been fun, Like I really enjoyed it. George, he's a great mentor to look up to, like a big brother. Taught me a lot, and just gave me a better perception on how to like take on and be a pro. Like he's showing me the ropes of how to be a pro.
I'm saying this question from a unique standpoint here. When you were a tight end at Pike High School, and I think it was your sophomore year, you scored a touchdown in a scrimmage game against Franklin Central, and I was the defensive coordinator for the JV at Franklin Central. So, So I was like, I know the name, but I don't know Division II. I was like, oh, that guy scored a touchdown against me. So, what would be one word that you would describe the journey that you've had being a former JV tight end at Pike High School and now being an NFL tackle, having a chance to make the Seahawks roster?
One word.
One word.
Proud. Just proud of myself. Proud of like coming from where I come from. I didn't come from a football school. I didn't come from a great football background, and to be able to be here in my shoes, get drafted, have the chance to make the active roster, and things like that. Like proud, because looking back 10 years ago, if I would have told somebody I was going to be getting drafted by the Seattle Seahawks in 2024, they probably would have laughed at me. And just to see how far I've always stayed the course, worked hard, put my head down, did whatever the coaches asked me to do, plus more, and I would say I'm proud of myself.
Hey, pleasure to meet you, man. And my JV days.
I didn't get the end of that, but I made sure to let him know when JV days. I'm still kind of upset about that touchdown that we gave up to him down the seam. It was a coverage breakdown coupled with the fact that he was a 240-pound tight end that we had nobody that could cover. Anyway, as always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rank. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have more takeaways, day 11 Seahawks training camp, and another special interview that'll be coming your way, an opportunity to chat with Laviska Shenault, one of the new receivers that's been added to Seattle's offense. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.